All right, my wonderful students. So at this point, you have read A Railway Adventure, and you are prepared to answer the questions. So before we look at the answers to the questions that you've already done, I want to point out a couple of cool types of sensory language and show don't tell that the author uses. So to characterize Harry, he doesn't say much to describe him in terms of telling. He shows a lot. So for example, clutching his suitcase tightly. What does that show about him? Well, maybe it shows he's a nervous type of character, or he's anxious. When it says things like, the lady at the ticket counter asked how old he was, this is a really clever way that the author shows you that he's 12 years old without saying, I'm a 12-year-old boy named Harry. It's all a natural part of the story to show that he's 12. And notice how it's in dialogue. That's always a good way to show things. Okay? And now looking at our actual story, our questions. What does the phrase lost in a sea of nameless faces? In a sea of nameless faces. Is that a metaphor or is that personification, first of all? Lost in a sea of nameless faces. That sounds like a metaphor to me. So let's think it through. A, it shows that Harry went missing in the large crowd at the station. Maybe. It indicates that Harry did not know anybody as he watched the people in the crowd. Maybe. It explains that Harry met a lot of people at the train station but could not remember what their names were. No, the fact that they're nameless faces doesn't mean he couldn't remember. That's not what the author's getting at. It demonstrates that Harry was nervous about meeting new people while on his trip. No, that's not what being lost has to do with. So I'm between A and B. Now, I'm going to actually look at where this happens in the passage to get some more context. And so here's our sentence. So I know he's nervous, right, already from clutching his suitcase. Then it goes on to say, the people in the crowd moved quickly through the train station while Harry became lost in the sea of nameless faces. Everyone was going somewhere different, and Harry enjoyed playing the game of trying to guess where each traveler was going. So the strategy I usually use is use context from the sentence before and the sentence after. Anytime you use context, that's a good way to do it. Okay, so that definitely helped me out. So knowing that he was nervous, I think, let me see, indicates that Harry did not know anybody as he watched the crowd of people. It shows he went missing in the large crowd. I'm thinking B. Let me check to see if he actually went missing ever. No, it never goes on to say that he was searching for his grandfather or his grandfather went looking for him. He never actually got lost. It's basically saying this. He went missing in the crowd. Okay? Number 6. Which sentence from the text best explains why the train trip is so important to Harry's grandfather? They were starting. So this doesn't explain why it's important to them. This just explains the trip. So it's not actually answering the question. So A is wrong. B, Harry had never traveled to the train before and he was excited to explore. That's a maybe, but probably not the best. Harry and his grandfather were seated in the front rail car of the train. That's not why it's important to the grandfather. Oh, okay. So that means it can't be B, right? Why is it important to the grandfather? This is why it's important to Harry, because he's never been in a train before. And this is also why it's important to Harry, because he's in the front car. But it's not why it's important to the grandfather. So far none of these. So it should be D, but we have to confirm it. I rode this train when I was his age, and it was the best trip I'd ever been on. So I wanted to share the experience with him. There we go. So it's because the grandpa had a really good experience. He wants to share it with his grandson, and that is why it's so important to the grandfather. Okay? Now that you are done with this, and you kind of heard me walk you through it, you're going to get to read this cool story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow of the Headless Horseman, and this guy named Ichabod Crane. Ichabod Crane. Ichabod. Okay? And this story has some really cool figurative language, especially in that first paragraph, and it has a nice image that actually helps you imagine what our character of Ichabod looks like. So read this cool little short story, then answer the 4 questions that follow. Again, a good idea always, especially as we're approaching map testing, is preview these questions first. It really does make a difference in kind of cluing you into what to be paying attention to, right? So I know I'm going to be paying attention to looking for a simile. I know I'm going to be trying to pay attention to the tone of it. I'm going to be paying attention to what the main character is like. I'm going to pay attention to why he takes residence or stays at the home of his pupils. So I'm not going too crazy with previewing the questions, but just kind of noting what to look for. Simile, tone, main character, those things. Okay? Read and enjoy. Thanks, guys.